So one of the first things we start with when we have our video idea is a storyboard, script or a shot list, or all three. And so script, storyboards, and shot list are really important because they help us to plan ahead and organize our shoots and the full production. They also help us communicate our vision if we need to bring other people involved, if we're hiring somebody. These documents help us to basically create the roadmap and communicate the vision. They also help us to know if we can pull off this vision, and we use them as a checklist to make sure that we don't forget anything while we're shooting and in post-production. First, let's talk about scripts. Scripts are basically the written version of your video in extreme detail. So that's everything from describing the shot, to the dialogue, to the transitions, to who's speaking, all the details. So you can basically read that script and you'll get a sense of exactly what that video is going to be about. This is most likely going to be a bit too much for most of us when our video production planning. There's probably a little bit too much detail, but if you do want to map out your production completely and have all the details figured out, a script is what you would do. For most of us, we're probably going to focus our script writing if there is voiceover or interviews or any sort of dialogue that's in the video. And so any sort of talking parts that we have in the video, we want to make sure that we at least have rough bullets points, but ideally we actually write out a script. If we're doing interviews, generally we want to know what the points are being covered, but we want to leave it up to the interviewee to use their own language. But if we're doing voiceover or any sort of speaking direct to camera, having that script is going to really help us determine what we need to shoot and make sure that our timing is going to be correct. And so a lot of times we'll write down our ideas, we'll draft out a rough script, and then it's important to read that script and to time it and to make sure that we know how long it's going to be. Because if we're, say it's a 1-minute video is the end goal, and we write out a script and it ends up being, 45 to 50 seconds of talking, that only gives us about 10 seconds for the intro and the conclusion, and no buffer room for any sort of time in between the talking. And you'll be surprised a lot of times when you read out the script how long it actually is. And sometimes, you might see a short little paragraph and think, okay, that's probably about 10 or 15 seconds, but actually time yourself reading it, and you may realize that it turns out to be more like 20 or 30 seconds. And that difference can be huge when you're in post-production. When you're trying to get some information and have some pace in your video, some pace with that information, and not having any buffer room means that we have to cut stuff out. And so writing your script in advance of shooting will help you create a better time and flow of your video. The other more important thing, or equally important aspect of writing your script out, is that so we know that we're going to have footage to show while that talking is happening on the video. And so if there's a 10-second chunk within that script that is describing something that we can't shoot that day that we're planning to shoot, how else are we going to find footage? How else are we going to find things to go into the video while that talking is happening on camera? And so that is really important, so that when we're sitting down to do the post, we don't have huge gaps where the narrator went on for 20 seconds talking about this great hiking trail, but we don't have any footage of that because that wasn't planned on our shoot days. And so if we know of everything that's going to be mentioned in the video before we plan the shoot day, we'll know where the gaps are and what we actually need to focus on, and also the volume of video content we'll need to cover that voice, that script. And so what you typically will end up with as far as your script is more of a framework that looks like this. And so just basically 2 columns where you have your script, your audio, what's being said either to the camera or as voiceover, and then the visual direction that matches that. And so again, that's going to map out any sort of voice that we have in the video and making sure that we have visual assets that can line up with that. Because there are other ways of finding assets or creating assets that aren't necessarily what we're going to go out and shoot that day. So we might only have one day to shoot. We only have a few people to use as models, and say we're only going to do this one mountain biking trail. But we're also, in the script, we want to make sure we talk about some of the other things to do in the area. And so we might not be able to afford to send a videographer to go capture those things, but maybe we can source that content from somewhere else. Maybe there's a tourism board that has video assets that we can use. Or maybe there's a stock site we can go and find something that will make sense there. So find some stock video. Or we can use titles and slides and different graphics to go over top of that. There's a variety of different ways that we can fill those gaps. But the most important thing with this section is that we identify those gaps so that we know that we can budget and plan for them in post-production. And we're going to talk about how to fill those gaps in the post-production section. So a storyboard is a great way to visualize the major shots, the scenes of your story, of your video content. Use a storyboard as a springboard to build your shot list, which we're going to talk about next, around your anchor points, so your main scenes. So here's an example of a storyboard, and again, I'll provide a template for you to download, but honestly, it's just a bunch of squares. So it's really not that necessary. It's not that complicated. The complicated thing is in the amount of detail that you want to put into it. Another thing you can do that I like doing is using a whiteboard or sticky notes, and each shot or scene is a different sticky note, because what that allows you to do is to move things around, because that's what's going to happen. Once you map out your story, you're going to see if it flows, if it works, if the narrative is going in the right direction, or if things are out of order. And a lot of times you'll want to move stuff around. And so that's the most important part of doing a storyboard, is to make sure that all the details are there, all the information, all the content that you want to be able to produce that story. Because you don't want to have to come into the editing room after shot it and saying, you know what, there's a big gap here. We can't go from here to here. It's confusing. We need a couple scenes that are going to show that, this is connected to that. And if you map it out visually, you can see that before you start shooting. And so it actually will save, it takes a lot of time and effort, but it's going to save you time and money down the road, especially if you're the one doing the storyboarding and you're not paying somebody else to do it, but you're paying somebody to shoot and edit. Then this storyboard is going to go a long way in helping them understand your vision, and it's going to really help them to be more efficient in capturing what they need to capture in order to tell this story properly. From the storyboard, you can then create a much better detailed shot list. And so at the very minimum, you should have a shot list for your pre-production. Ideally, it's a storyboard and a shot list, and if you want to be really detailed, it's a script, a storyboard, and a shot list. But if you really want to, roll the dice, at least have a shot list. And so a shot list can be as detailed or as simple as you want, but basically it's a roadmap to finish your project so that you don't miss anything, you don't forget anything while you're out shooting, or while you've handed the camera to somebody else and they're off shooting. And so it's a guide that describes and lists the shots that need to be captured. So here's the shot list template that you'll be provided with, and there's a number of columns here. You can delete them, you can add to them, or you can use them all, but you can't delete the shot description. That is the most important one, because that becomes your checklist of the shots that you need to get on your shoot days. And so make sure you keep that one at least. But I mean, the rest you can fill out based on your knowledge and skill level, or how much detail you want to put into the shot list. So that could be everything from, does this shot need sound? Is it an interior or an exterior shot? The location of the shot is important too. What kind of gear is being used? Is there camera movement? Is it a drone shot? Is it on a gimbal? Or is it on a tripod? What type of shot it is as well, and that's an abbreviation. We're going to get to that in a second. And who's involved in the shot, so the cast as well. And you can order these and list them and keep track of them so that you can check them off as your shoot day goes. So again, a shot list can be very quick and just bullet point list of the types of shots you want. And they don't have to be that detailed. But the more refined you get, the more experience you get in doing these kind of productions and working on ShotList, is that you may find that you want to direct a little bit more, and so actually list what type of shot it is. And so one of the ways we do that is by studying other videos and watching other video content to kind of understand when they're using different types of shots, and try to produce that ourselves and understand that, you know, when's a good time to have an extreme close-up, when's a good time for a wide shot or a medium shot. And so one of the things that helps us with that is learning the lingo. And so one of the other resources that I'll provide is just a breakdown of the different types of shots there are that you can be thinking about adding to your production if you want to get into that level of detail. And so it's not just, hey, I want a shot of somebody biking. Well, what type of shot? Is it a tracking shot? Is it a moving shot? Is it a close-up? Is it a wide shot? You know, in those different types of shots. And so here's a short video that will just kind of give you a sampling and hopefully start you thinking about the different types of shots that you see in videos, and to pay attention to that so that you can see what you like for your video content and be able to try to reproduce that.